Battle of Red Cliffs. The Battle of Red Cliffs in the winter of 208 to 209 AD stands as one of the largest naval battles in history, where a smaller allied force decisively defeated a massive northern army on the Yangtze River. Northern warlord Cao Cao, commanding an estimated 220,000 to 240,000 troops, sought to unify China under his rule by conquering the southern kingdoms. Opposing him were the allied forces of Liu Bei and Sun Quan, fielding only about 50,000 combined troops under the brilliant command of Zhou Yu. The battle's decisive moment came when the Allies exploited Cao Cao's critical weakness. His northern soldiers were unfamiliar with naval warfare and had chained their ships together to reduce seasickness. Zhou Yu's forces launched fire ships into the chained fleet, and flames spread catastrophically across the wooden warships. The winter winds carried the inferno through Cao Cao's entire navy, creating a scene of destruction visible for miles as black smoke billowed over the Yangtze and panicked soldiers leaped into the freezing river. The defeat prevented Cao Cao from unifying China and established the Three Kingdoms division between Wei, Shu, and Wu that would last until 280 AD. This battle demonstrated that superior strategy and knowledge of terrain could overcome overwhelming numerical advantage, and the fire attack became legendary in Chinese military history. The battle was later immortalized in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, one of China's 4 great classical novels, though historians distinguish between the historical facts recorded in Chen Shou's records of the Three Kingdoms and later fictional embellishments. Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr on March 13th, 624 AD marked the first major military victory for the early Muslim community and remains one of the most significant battles in Islamic history. According to Islamic sources, Prophet Muhammad led approximately 313 to 319 Muslim fighters from Medina against a Meccan Quraysh force of around 900 to 1,000 warriors near the wells of Badr in the Hejaz region of modern Saudi Arabia. The Muslims were dramatically outnumbered, yet achieved a decisive victory that Islamic tradition attributes partly to divine intervention, with the battle commemorated in the Quran's Surah Al-Anfal. The conflict originated from a dispute over a Meccan trade caravan, but its consequences extended far beyond economics. Muslim casualties totaled only 14 killed, while the Meccans suffered approximately 70 deaths, including their commander Abu Jahl, and 70 captured. The single-day battle transformed the nascent Muslim community in Medina from a group of refugees into a credible military and political force in Arabia. Ransoms paid for Meccan prisoners provided crucial financial resources for the developing Islamic State. The victory severely weakened the Quraysh tribe's dominance in the region and boosted Muslim morale at a critical early stage. Contemporary Islamic biographical literature, including works by Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham, provides detailed accounts of the battle, though scholars note that some supernatural elements, described in religious texts, such as angelic assistance, represent matters of faith rather than historical documentation. The battle established military precedents and strategic principles that would guide subsequent Islamic expansion across Arabia and beyond, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the Arabian Peninsula. Battle of Talis. The Battle of Talis in July 751 AD marked the collision between two great empires at the height of their power, Tang Dynasty China and the Abbasid Caliphate, fighting for control of Central Asia near the Talis River in modern Kazakhstan. Tang forces, numbering approximately 30,000 and commanded by the Korean-born general Gao Xianzhi, faced an Abbasid army that Chinese sources claim reached 200,000. Though historians believe the actual number was closer to 100,000 under commander Ziyad ibn Saleh. The 5-day battle's turning point came when the Karluk Turks, initially allied with the Tang, switched sides mid-combat and attacked the Chinese from behind. This betrayal led to catastrophic Tang losses, with most soldiers either killed or captured. While relatively small in scale compared to other engagements, Talis had enormous strategic consequences that resonated for centuries. The defeat marked the westernmost extent of Chinese expansion and the easternmost reach of Islamic conquest, establishing a cultural and political boundary in Central Asia that persists today. The battle's most significant legacy, however, may be technological rather than territorial. Among the Chinese prisoners taken to Samarkand were skilled papermakers who, according to historical accounts, taught their craft to their captors. This transfer of papermaking technology from China to the Islamic world, and eventually to Europe, revolutionized communication and learning across continents. The Tang dynasty, already strained by internal pressures, never recovered its Central Asian territories, particularly after the devastating Aleutian Rebellion erupted just 4 years later in 755 AD, permanently ending Chinese ambitions in the region. Battle of Bac Dong River. The Battle of Bac Dong River in 938 AD ended over 1,000 years of Chinese domination over Vietnam through one of history's most ingenious tactical ambushes. Vietnamese commander Ngo Nguyen faced a massive southern Han Chinese invasion fleet sailing down the Bac Dang River toward the Gulf of Tonkin, with Chinese sources suggesting forces exceeding 100,000 troops under Liu Hongkao, son of the southern Han ruler. Ngo Nguyen's smaller Vietnamese force, numbering several thousand according to historical chronicles, appeared hopelessly outmatched in conventional terms. However, Ngo Nguyen devised a brilliant defensive strategy that exploited his intimate knowledge of the river's tidal patterns. During low tide, his forces planted hundreds of iron-tipped wooden stakes in the riverbed at strategic points, with the stakes completely submerged when the tide rose. Vietnamese boats then appeared before the Chinese fleet at high tide, engaging briefly before executing a feigned retreat that drew the confident Chinese warships deeper into the river. As the tide began receding, the hidden stakes gradually emerged from the water, and the massive Chinese vessels found themselves impaled and immobilized on the iron-tipped obstacles. Trapped ships tilted precariously as water levels dropped, rendering them unable to maneuver or defend themselves effectively. Ngo Nguyen's forces then counterattacked, overwhelming the helpless fleet and achieving a devastating victory. This triumph ended Chinese northern domination that had lasted since 111 BC, and Ngo Nguyen established himself as the first Vietnamese emperor, founding the Ngo dynasty in 939 AD. Vietnamese chronicles record that this same stake trap tactic was successfully employed again in 1288 at the identical location against Mongol invaders, demonstrating the enduring effectiveness of the strategy and cementing Bac Dong River as a symbol of Vietnamese resistance and tactical ingenuity against superior forces. Battle of Hattin. The Battle of Hattin on July 4th, 1187, stands as one of the most decisive engagements of the Crusades, where Saladin's tactical genius destroyed the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem's field army and opened the path to recapturing the Holy City. The Crusader force of approximately 20,000 troops, including 1,200 heavily armored knights under King Guy of Jerusalem, marched through the brutal Galilean summer heat toward the twin-peaked horns of Hattin, attempting to relieve the besieged fortress of Tiberias. Saladin commanded roughly 30,000 Ayyubid forces and brilliantly maneuvered to cut the Crusaders off from water sources, forcing them to camp overnight on the waterless plateau. Contemporary chronicles describe how Muslim archers set fire to the dry grass, creating choking smoke that added to the Crusaders' misery as temperatures soared. By morning, the Christian forces were desperately thirsty, exhausted from heat, and demoralized as they faced fresh Muslim cavalry circling their positions. The Crusaders attempted to break through to the springs of Hattin, but were systematically destroyed, with approximately 17,000 killed or captured while Muslim casualties remained relatively light. King Guy was captured alive along with the True Cross relic, a devastating psychological blow. Saladin personally executed Reynald of Chatillon, who had repeatedly broken truces and attacked Muslim caravans. The annihilation of the Crusader army left Jerusalem defenseless, and Saladin captured the city on October 2, 1187, ending 88 years of Crusader rule. This catastrophic defeat precipitated the Third Crusade, as European powers scrambled to reclaim their lost territories. The battle demonstrated the critical importance of logistics, terrain, and water supply in medieval desert warfare, lessons that military strategists would study for centuries. Mongol invasions of Japan. The Mongol invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281 AD represent the largest amphibious assault attempts before the 20th century, and the only major military defeats suffered by Kublai Khan's otherwise unstoppable empire. The first invasion in November 1274 saw approximately 23,000 to 40,000 Mongol, Korean, and Chinese troops aboard 900 ships land at Hakata Bay on Kyushu Island, where they encountered fierce resistance from Japanese samurai despite Mongol advantages in gunpowder weapons and coordinated tactics. After a single day of intense fighting, the invasion force withdrew to their ships, and a typhoon struck that night, destroying roughly 200 vessels and forcing the fleet to return to Korea. Undeterred, Kublai Khan prepared a massive second invasion in summer 1281, assembling an eastern fleet of 40,000 to 50,000 troops from Korea and a southern fleet of 100,000 from China, totaling approximately 140,000 soldiers aboard of 4,400 ships. Japanese defenders had spent the intervening years constructing defensive stone walls along Hakata Bay and preparing for the renewed assault. The invasion forces arrived in June and July 1281, but faced determined resistance and could not establish secure beachheads. On August 15th to 16th, 1281, a catastrophic typhoon, what the Japanese called kamikaze or divine wind, struck the Mongol fleets with devastating force. Historical records and modern archaeological discoveries of shipwrecks confirm that the storm destroyed an estimated 60 to 90% of the invasion force, drowning tens of thousands. The twin failures marked a turning point, as Kublai Khan never attempted a third invasion. For Japan, the victories reinforced a belief in divine protection and island invincibility that persisted for centuries, though the massive defensive costs contributed to the eventual fall of the Kamakura shogunate in 1333. Battle of Ain Jalut. The Battle of Ain Jalut on September 3, 1260, marked the first decisive defeat of the Mongol Empire in open field combat, and permanently halted their westward expansion into Africa and the Mediterranean. Mamluk Sultan Qutuz of Egypt led approximately 20,000 elite cavalry against a Mongol Ilkhanate force of 10,000 to 20,000 warriors, commanded by the veteran Christian general Kitbuka, at the Spring of Goliath in the Jezreel Valley of Galilee. The Mongols had recently sacked Baghdad, destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate, and conquered Syria, appearing unstoppable as they advanced toward Egypt. However, the Mamluks, themselves former slave soldiers trained from youth in cavalry warfare, possessed tactical skills matching the fearsome Mongol horsemen. General Baybars led the Mamluk vanguard in a feigned retreat, a classic steppe tactic the Mongols themselves frequently employed, drawing Kitbuka's forces deeper into the valley where hidden Mamluk units surrounded them. The resulting battle was fierce, with both sides demonstrating exceptional horsemanship and archery, but the Mamluks' superior numbers and tactical position proved decisive. Kitbuka fought to the death rather than surrender, and most of his army was destroyed. The timing proved crucial, as the Mongol Empire was fragmenting following Great Khan Munka's death in 1259, meaning the Ilkhanate could not immediately reinforce its defeated army. The victory saved Mamluk Egypt from conquest, and preserved the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina from Mongol rule. Ironically, Sultan Qutuz enjoyed his triumph for less than 2 months before Baybars assassinated him in October 1260 and seized the Sultanate. The battle demonstrated that the Mongols were not invincible and established the Mamluks as the dominant power in the Middle East for the next 2.5 centuries. Siege of Constantinople. The Siege of Constantinople from April 6 to May 29th, 1453 ended 1,123 years of Byzantine rule and marked the final collapse of the Roman Empire, with the fall symbolizing for many historians the definitive end of the Middle Ages. 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, later known as Mehmed the Conqueror, commanded a force estimated between 80,000 and 200,000 troops against Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, and his desperate garrison of only 7,000 to 10,000 defenders, including allied Genoese soldiers. The legendary Theodosian Walls, triple-layered fortifications built in the 5th century that had protected the city for a millennium, finally met their match in the form of massive bronze cannons, particularly the enormous bombard crafted by Hungarian engineer Orban that fired 600-kilogram stone balls from his 27-foot barrel. The Ottomans initially struggled to breach the Golden Horn harbor due to a massive chain barrier, but Mehmed ordered 70 ships dragged overland across the Galata hillside on greased logs, a feat of engineering that bypassed the defenses and demoralized the defenders. Contemporary eyewitness accounts from multiple sources, including Venetian surgeon Niccolo Barbaro and Byzantine historian George Francis, describe the final assault on May 29th beginning before dawn, with waves of Ottoman soldiers overwhelming the exhausted defenders. Emperor Constantine XI reportedly removed his imperial regalia to die fighting anonymously alongside his men, though his body was never positively identified. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves through Christian Europe, with Greek scholars fleeing westward and contributing to the Italian Renaissance. The city became Istanbul and served as the Ottoman capital, while the Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque. The siege demonstrated that gunpowder artillery had rendered medieval fortifications obsolete and established the Ottomans as the dominant power controlling the critical junction between Europe and Asia. Battle of Nagashino. The Battle of Nagashino on June 29, 1575, revolutionized Japanese warfare when Oda Nobunaga demonstrated that coordinated firearms could destroy even the most legendary cavalry forces, fundamentally changing samurai combat doctrine. Nobunaga and his ally Tokugawa Ieyasu commanded approximately 38,000 troops, including roughly 3,000 arquebusiers equipped with Tanegashima matchlock rifles, against Takeda Katsuyori's 15,000-strong army that included Japan's most feared cavalry units inherited from his legendary father Takeda Shingen. The Takeda clan's mounted samurai had dominated Japanese battlefields for decades, their charges considered nearly unstoppable by conventional forces. However, Nobunaga constructed wooden palisades protecting his gunners and reportedly organized them into 3 rotating ranks, allowing continuous volley fire while some musketeers reloaded. When Takeda's elite cavalry charged across the open battlefield near Nagashino in Mikawa province, they encountered devastating firepower that cut down horses and riders before they could close with Nobunaga's lines. Historical chronicles, particularly the Shinshokoki written by Otaguchi, describe the systematic destruction of the Takeda forces, with approximately 10,000 killed, including numerous high-ranking generals, while Oda Tokugawa casualties remained relatively light. The 3-rank rotation system's actual use remains debated among historians, as the concept appears roughly simultaneously in both Japanese and European military developments, but the battle's outcome was undeniable. The defeat shattered the Takeda clan's military power, and they were completely eliminated within 7 years. Nagashino validated Nobunaga's modernization efforts and demonstrated that traditional samurai values emphasizing individual combat prowess and cavalry charges were becoming obsolete in the face of disciplined firearm tactics. The lessons learned at Nagashino helped pave Nobunaga's path toward unifying Japan, a process eventually completed by Tokugawa Ieyasu, who gained invaluable experience during this pivotal engagement. Battle of Sekigahara. The Battle of Sekigahara on October 21, 1600, was the largest samurai battle in Japanese history, with approximately 160,000 warriors clashing in a narrow valley that determined Japan's political future for the next 268 years. Tokugawa Ieyasu's eastern army of roughly 89,000 troops faced Ishida Mitsunari's western army of 82,000 in a conflict that began shrouded in dense autumn fog and concluded in just 6 hours with a betrayal that changed everything. The battle arose from the power vacuum following warlord Toyotomi Hideyoshi's death in 1598, splitting Japan's feudal lords into 2 massive coalitions. The 58-year-old Tokugawa Ieyasu positioned his forces strategically, but the outcome remained uncertain as fierce fighting erupted across the foggy battlefield in Mino Province, modern Gifu Prefecture. The decisive moment came around noon when Kobayakawa Hideaki, commanding 15,000 troops ostensibly aligned with the Western forces, suddenly turned his soldiers against his own coalition and attacked from his position on Mount Matsuo. This catastrophic betrayal triggered a cascade of additional defections as other opportunistic commanders switched sides, and the Western army collapsed rapidly. Historical records indicate approximately 32,000 Western casualties compared to only 4,000 Eastern losses. Ishida Mitsunari was captured and executed shortly after, along with other Western leaders. Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory made him de facto ruler of Japan, and he was appointed shogun in 1603, establishing the Tokugawa shogunate that would govern Japan in relative peace until the Meiji Restoration of 1868. The battle ended the Sengoku period of constant warfare and ushered in the Edo period, characterized by political stability, economic growth, cultural flourishing, and Japan's famous policy of isolation from the outside world. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.